So I wanted to, again, talk a little bit about interfaith life and what that looks like today. I'll speak kind of personally what it looks like for me, and why it's important as well, if that's all right, and have a little conversation, if that's all right. I found that growing up, I think I saw it as dangerous. So I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland, and I came up in a time when you didn't sort of cross certain lines. So I grew up in a black neighborhood, and down the street, probably 2 miles, was what we describe as a poor white neighborhood, and we didn't go over there, they didn't go over here. And not 10 miles away in Pikesville was one of the Jewish neighborhoods over there. We didn't go there, they didn't come to North Baltimore. There's a small kind of black Muslim neighborhood that kind of had their own space over there as well. Some small Indian pockets, sort of a Latino, Latina, Latinx corner as well. And you kind of knew where they were, and if you had to drive through, it was fine. It's not that it was dangerous. It was just that we didn't go there, they didn't go to us. It wasn't physically dangerous, but there was always a concern that it might be uncomfortable. Or maybe it would be unpleasant in some dangerous ways. And I think a lot of us grew up like that. People talked about, my wife is Italian. She's half Sicilian. And talking to her grandfather and her great-grandparents, they talked about how, people came from Sicily and moved to like little Italies, essentially, in different parts of the country. And ultimately, Rochester, New York is where her father's family settled. And in Rochester, in Little Italy, they were in like sort of the Catholic Sicilian part of Italy. And they went to the same parish, Catholic parish, and they went to the same school that was connected to that Catholic parish. And if you were going to get married, you were going to marry somebody at one of the Catholic dances that they had for like high school kids, so that we could kind of meet our own people and stay there together. And then you were raised and you were baptized and confirmed, and your marriage was going to be in that parish, and you were going to find work within like a 2-mile radius here. And a part of that was sort of the immigrant mentality of survival, is you buy Italian, you sell to Italians, it's kind of so that we can make it here in the new land. And it's nothing really against other populations, but that's kind of how immigrant populations sometimes would make it. And this repeats in Chinatowns. This repeats in sort of northeast Philly and kind of Polish enclaves and Russian enclaves. And so that people kind of come here with people who speak your language, who maybe look like you, who worship like you. It feels comfortable. And that's human. But what does that look like 4 generations later? And what are we missing by sort of just living in our 2-mile radius spiritually? I think we're missing a lot. And it's been one of the surprising blessings of my life, going outside, going the 3rd mile outside of it, and learning, because a couple reasons. I think it makes us better citizens of this country. A melting pot is the term we used to use. I think it's better to kind of talk about kind of just a diverse, complicated space than this melting into one thing. I think it makes us better national citizens. I think it makes us better global citizens. And I think it makes us better Christians. That surprised me. I remember in high school I dated someone who was Catholic. I remember my family talking about her as if she was like the furthest religion away from our Protestantism that we were raised in. Like, be careful, Candace's family invited me to go to church with them. You're not going to that church. It might rub off on you. And the belief was that they were going to hell. And there's a theological conversation to be had about different denominations and different religions, but it was deeper than that. It was like, don't even entertain the idea. And that was just sort of a different part of, in my eyes, sort of the broader body of Christianity. Let alone, I had friends invite me to bar mitzvahs growing up. When I was younger, no, you ain't going to that. Why? Were they afraid that some Jewishness was going to kind of like stick to me, or that I might convert, or that it might, fuzzy my own theology, maybe? Or when sort of Nation of Islam people in North Philly were sort of had the bow ties and would be selling bean pies and giving sort of the Muhammad Speaks newspapers, they would roll the window up as if folks were dangerous. And no. But over the years, after having a chance to kind of get to know people, again, I think it's made me a better citizen, human, and ultimately I think a better Christian. How has it made me a better Christian? I think in some very practical ways. How has it made me a better citizen? I think in some essential, crucial ways right now. So I work at Penn. It's sort of one of the strangest, most amazing, terrible, wonderful sort of jobs I've ever had. And I'm in a good mood about Penn right now. We won the Big Five championship last night. And I said that to a friend who was in California. He was like, what is the Big Five? I was like, man, we beat Villanova and Temple and St. Joe's and LaSalle in the same year. It's important for ministers to be humble. I am extraordinarily arrogant about this right now. And they will hear my mouth for 12 months about this sort of ridiculous sort of thing. But one of the gifts of Penn, aside from some of the brightest minds in the country, great students, wonderful colleagues, terrific research, like all the good there, is it's such a wonderfully diverse place. And when I went there as an undergrad, it was the first time I had a conversation with someone who was not black or white. It was the first conversation I had with someone who was really Muslim. Certainly the first Hindu person I think I knew was Hindu, or Buddhist, or Sikh. And they were just like on my hall. And that can be frightening. One of the phone calls I get every year as chaplain is in July and August, parents who are nervous about their incoming freshmen, which I get. And the first questions are like, how are the dorms? Are they going to be okay? What's moving like? They haven't found their classes. I'm like, sure, we can talk about it. But then the ultimate question is my kid going to lose their faith? My religiously observant student, are they going to lose their faith? Are they going to change? And I say, ultimately, they probably won't lose their faith. I think most sort of lifetime journeys of people of faith show that students tend to kind of attend worship less in college, but they tend not to leave their faith. Sort of most people between 18 to 22 tend to go to church less, but by the time they couple off and are kind of 30 and begin to have kids, then they're sort of back around the same. Very few just sort of abandon faith totally, but they will change radically. It's the student who was homeschooled in the South and comes here and their roommate is a gay Hindu man. It is revolutionarily changing for some. It's frightening. And what really does it isn't so much like, what does this mean for, but it's, this guy's awesome too, my roommate. And he's doing so much good community service, and he's in an a cappella group, and he's funny, and he's smart, and he wants to dedicate his life to sort of making clean water in Africa. And then there's a question, is that guy going to hell? Like I was taught all those years. That's a heavy, heavy question for an 18-year-old to think about. But I find that it's not those questions that I wrestle with most. I sort of leave who's going up or down to God, ultimately. I think we'll find out on the other side. But to me, the bigger questions are sort of, wow, what can we learn from one another? And so, every year I've been invited to our Muslim Student Association, MSA. They have Jummah, worship services every Friday at 1-ish. And once a year I'm invited to come and give the khutbah, like a sermon to them. And seeing these sort of 18 to 22-year-olds pray with such devotion in a country where they're feeling a lot of Islamophobia since 9/11, to be quite frank. And to see them kind of beautifully and defiantly still eat halal, eat sort of the equivalent of kosher in Islam, to see them pray multiple times a day in between classes, to see them dare wear hijab, see them get on their faces, convicted me as a Christian. And not in the sense of, wow, is their religion right, is my religion wrong? One, I was moved by their courage. And how many times in life have I tucked in my cross because I didn't want people to sort of know that I was a Christian or a believer or something like that. Whereas people wear major signifiers of their religion. Or how sloppy have I been with prayer? You know, I sit down with my 3 girls for lunch sometimes, and I start eating like, Daddy, you didn't say grace. Like, oh, young, and I'm the minister. Like, I should be saying that. It's slop messy. But to see sort of the devotion of Muslim brothers and sisters, it challenged me, still challenges me, and was the first thing that inspired me to kind of work through a daily office of prayer. Sort of think kind of morning prayer, midday prayer, noonday prayer, complement, that kind of thing. I was moved to that by watching Muslims pray. And I don't pray in Arabic. I don't do any of the Muslim prayer, but it blessed me. And I think being a little bit open to sort of seeing what our neighbors are doing might bless us too. Or at Penn, we sort of weirdly have like 12 Buddhist meditation groups that are mostly friends, mostly. And seeing others meditate for the first time. Whereas I think before I thought meditation was like something evil, that kind of closing eyes and kind of, to me, that wasn't prayer, and that was something spiritually dangerous, and you don't know what might come in if you're kind of, that was the first time I thought about sort of something like Lectio Divino, and kind of meditating on our scripture, or kind of just trying to get quiet so I can hear what Jesus is saying to me. Not meditating in a Buddhist tradition, but letting that inspire me. Or seeing the deep pacifism of my Jain students. So if you think about kind of different types of religion, there's the kind of Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, kind of descending from Abraham. People would describe something like the Dharmic faiths, like faiths that have like Dharma kind of things in them, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Jainism, just kind of mostly center around India and kind of the East. One of them is Jainism, which is a predominantly Indian from the country of India. A beautifully peaceful religion, to the point where like some super observant Jains are scared to step on like a bug, or some will wear like a mask so that they don't like inhale or blow on an insect, and they're vegetarians and all that. Beautiful, a lot for our dining halls to take care of, in a sense. But wow. And I think I began to think about Jesus as the Prince of Peace by seeing 19-year-old pacifist Jain kids from India on my campus. I think I become a better Christian by the other faiths that I've had been forced to walk next to and work with. 2, it's forced me and my colleagues and everyone there to kind of gain a religious literacy. So one of our challenges, us in our Office of the Chaplain and Religious Studies Department, is to graduate religiously educated, religiously literate students. So working in a cosmopolitan world where our kids who want to be consultants or investment bankers or work at Google or lawyers or teachers or nurses are going to come in contact with people who believe differently than them. And it is irresponsible of us to let them graduate with only sort of mastering the technology or mastering the kind of skills to do their job without knowing how to deal with other people. And I'll give you an example. So at our dental school, we often come and do a workshop about engaging people who are of a different faith than you. And so one of the situations they often have is emergency dental medicine will happen. And in the middle of the night, a Muslim woman will come in with like a root canal problem. And it's only a man on duty, the one dentist is there. And what if in that Muslim woman's observance of Islam, she doesn't want to be touched by men? Not every Muslim woman is like that, but some are. Some Orthodox Jewish men are like that. Some Christian nuns are like that. And she comes in, and a male dentist who's not Muslim comes in. And she's, please don't touch me. What do you do? So these are some of the case studies we'll sit with them, or doctors in the emergency room, or nurses in the emergency room, about what do you do? You say, hey, look, I'm sorry, it's me or the highway, and fine, if you don't want me to work on it, you can be in pain. Or sort of other modesty things that different religions have. Can we do something simple like hang up kind of like a divider in the trauma bay? Or if there's a woman who's on staff, maybe she can come in and serve there. Or there are other things we can due to care, and to know why. It's not someone just being stubborn, like a stubborn patient. This is the most important thing in some people's lives. And we should know why. And so we try to show our students how to be religiously literate in the same way our students who are sort of international relations. There's basic training about you're going to China, you're going to India, there's traditions there. There's certain things you do and certain things you don't do. I went to Ghana with my best friend 2 years ago. And he says, Chaz, look, we're going into a special place here. There's a certain way you shake hands with people. Like there's a seniority way, and then you go like left to right, and you wait for older people to, and it was just like, what are you talking about? And he's like, if you don't do that, it'll be deeply offensive. Nobody's gonna kick you out, but like, this is basic kind of cultural education. In the same way, I think we should be basically religiously literate. But we're often very stubborn. This, to me, is one of the most frustrating things when we say this is a Judeo-Christian country. And I get where that's coming from. I think I understand, like, our origins, much that was infused into our earliest documents. Some of our leaders certainly were Christian in name at the very least. But there are people here who are not just Christian. And to expect them to kind of assimilate and fall in line is deeply un-Christian. For us to not be, and again, that doesn't mean we're going to change we're going to make it not Monday to Friday work week to kind of bend to certain people in the population so that Shabbat. No, it means actually just being decent and understanding why people do certain things. I feel like Jesus was listening to a song on the way over here this morning about Hillsong United, the group, and one of the songs was sort of relentless. God's love is relentless. And another song, Up in Arms, and how God's arms are just wide open for us, grace-wise. If our Savior's arms are wide open amidst our pitiful, sinful lives, how can our arms not also be wide open? So we try to educate our students. We try to make them better citizens along the way. What's this look like day to day? And at my work, and the tension for me, though, is if you ask me what I am religious-wise, I will say I'm a Christian. I don't want to say and proud. That's kind of a weird thing. Christian and proud. It's kind of I think we're supposed to be Christian and humble. But I think I'm blessed, and I haven't known a day of my life where I didn't believe Jesus was my Savior. And if you push me, I will say, and I think Jesus is the way. I think that salvation occurs through the salvific work of our Lord and Savior. We are saved by God's grace. And I believe in heaven. And I think we get there through the bridge of the cross and all that. So what's that mean for people who aren't Christian? Shouldn't we be out there trying to show people this good and tell people this good news? Shouldn't every time we preach, there's got to be an invitation, at least in posture, in personality? So when I get these invitations to be with our Muslim students or to give Devar Torah at Shabbat services at our campus Hillel for our Jewish students, I'm aware that I might be the only Christian voice these kids and staff members might ever hear, certainly this year. And there's a lot of me that kind of wants to kind of leave tracks at the door. On the other hand, I think that my first task is not to save them. I think the Savior saves. The first task is to love them. To love our neighbors who believe differently than us. And I found what this looks like is after 9/11 and the uptick in sort of hate at mosques and masjids, or after the travel ban. And I make no presumptions about anyone's politics, but I think we all know that the travel ban issued at the beginning of this presidency deeply wounded a lot of our Muslim neighbors, right or wrong. It was deeply wounding and scary to our Muslim friends and neighbors. What this looked like was, I have a Muslim neighbor who is a couple houses down from our old house, It was my girls sort of drawing a picture and us buying flowers and leaving it there for them. Or after the Jewish cemeteries, a year ago, downtown was defaced and some of the tombstones were kicked over. This is us having a vigil on campus. Or after the shooting in Pittsburgh a few months ago. This is us crying with them. Not saying, that's not my problem. That's too bad. Or making it like, oh, gun violence is the... Yeah, it is. And we can fight to work for that, and let's talk there. It's grieving with people, I think, is one of our first ways that we love our neighbors. And this is a very Christian thing. This is Jesus kind of robing God's self and humanity and kind of getting in the mud with us. And living it. And Jesus weeping. Lazarus is dead. Jesus wept. I think we should be weeping too. And to sort of open that up in our hearts. As opposed to fearing. And I think this is the big challenge I have for us. When we think of sort of the biggest example, Islam. I think we're sort of, the way that it's been socially constructed right now in our country is to fear Muslims. Or the kind of conspiracy theorist fear of our Jewish neighbors. Or the kind of far out fear of Hindus and Buddhists. As opposed to have some compassion, to have a Christ-like love and heartbreak at the hurt that so many of them feel. I think it's easy for us to grieve when we hear about sort of violence against Christians overseas. Or when we see that the way that we feel like kind of Christians are being oppressed by the media and other things, and appropriate. Can we have the same heartbreak for Muslim and Jewish neighbors too? I think our Lord wants us to. So I think the first challenge again of what does interfaith love and care look like? It's getting in the pain with others and grieving with them. Secondly, to me personally, it's having a radical hospitality. So what does it look like for me to love our religious neighbors on campus? It's when our Muslim kids say, hey, look, the room that we usually have prayer in is booked. It's me going to war and kind of finding another room for them. Kind of basic student affairs kind of drama that any college campus has all the time. Or our Hindu students are trying to have a Diwali festival. It's trying to find some money for them so they can buy some food and buy some lights and things like that for the room. Or it's kind of going to events and kind of being there. And I have my limits. So I know what I don't do. I won't worship another God. I don't believe it. I'm certainly not going to say a prayer I don't believe. But I'd love to come to lunch after your service. Yeah. Or hear something about it, or learn. And I would love to tell you about Christ. Tell me about Krishna. I'm never going to be convinced. I'm never going to believe, but I'm going to honor your story. And kind of listen to you and love you. And then finally, fight for you. So one of the most common sort of student messages we get are around kind of religious accommodation. So we have professors, and I apologize if any Penn professors are in the room, I'm sorry, but we have professors who kind of don't think about the calendar and schedule stuff like Friday nights at 8 p.m., which just for any college student is like a terrible time for an exam. They're trying to start their weekend and stuff. But it's also Shabbat. And many of our observant Jewish students aren't supposed to do work during that time. Or with Ramadan coming up during finals during this year, to sort of challenge them. A lot of our professors aren't sensitive to that. Or coaches. Coaches will bench students for missing a practice because of religious stuff. Part of our love is trying to fight for them. Trying to make it a little easier for them to be here on our campus. And be here in our country. To me, that's what interfaith love and relationships looks like today. It's not just sort of having, reading a book. I think that's Interfaith 101. Learning why people wear something or don't eat something. That's kind of 101. That's the first start. What's more importantly is having a relationship. And I want to challenge you all here. In one of the big cities in our country and world, if we don't have friends who are not Christian, you're doing it wrong. You're doing not only Christian, you're doing America wrong. Find a Jewish, a Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist friend and love them. And maybe by your love, you'll win them for Christ. You certainly won't do it by being afraid and mean. I don't mean to lecture you. It's more of a lecture to our country and to myself. This, to me, I think is what it needs to look like now. Well, thanks for letting me ramble a little bit there. I'd like to open it up. If anybody has any thoughts or questions, I'd love to have a little back and forth. Please, 1, 2, please. And please tell me your name, too.
Betty.
Hey, Betty. I have an Aunt Betty.
I was in college in North Carolina when there were a lot of students from the Middle East, and I didn't realize that women are seen differently than men. I tried to befriend and learn about Muslims from Syria and Iran, and I realized that the misunderstanding of me being friendly to them and being accepting of them, they took them the wrong way. And I feel that there's this difference between men and women still existing that is hard to bridge. I wonder what your thoughts are.
Yeah. It's an important question, and thank you for sharing part of your... Where'd you go to school down there?
NC State.
The Wolf Pack.
Right.
I don't know much, but I randomly know college mascots. It's a really strange... in March, it's very important. That's great. So a couple thoughts I think about to the question of engaging populations that may have very different worldviews, particularly on gender and other issues. I think the first thing is for us to be very careful to never broad stroke a tradition. Meaning, so we have a number of Pakistani Muslim students on our campus. Pakistan's probably one of the largest international, in India and China, the largest countries that send students to Penn. And a part of it is the way we recruit. A part of it is like once parents come, often their kids and their friends will come to that school, and there's just like a pipeline that remains forever. And Penn, I'm bragging, I'm sorry, was one of the, compared to a lot of our peer schools, admitted Jewish, Catholic, and Middle Eastern and Arab students before a lot of our peer schools did. Part of it was kind of a noble openness, and part of it was we were financially struggling and kind of there's like a less noble side of why we admitted some people like that. I think the first thing is be careful with the broad strokes. You have a lot of Pakistani students, and a lot of them are Muslim. And a lot of them are observant Muslim and hijabi wearing, and deeply, but a lot aren't. I had a Palestinian student, maybe 10 years ago at this point, who came to school fully hijab and did not show any skin but her hands and her eyes most of the time. But by junior year, she had like full hair out and like the perm and like was just in a different place and joined like a hip hop dance troupe and when her dad came for graduation, big conversation. That was the point is humans are complex. Islam is complex. The parallel story I'll say is I remember when I first met Leah's family in Rochester, my wife's family in Rochester, and almost to a person, in each home we went to, the men were sort of working class men, and none of the women had jobs. They cooked a lot and served the food and would let a man do a dish, and that was the culture. I remember talking to Leah about saying something pretty ignorant like, do all the women do all the cooking here in Italian Rochester? She's like, no, my Aunt Debbie has a job, and I kind of need the reminder, oh yeah, I only met like 4 people. And that was kind of a bad broad stroke of Italians in this country. Because Italian Americans are very complex. Good movie I saw last night called Green Book, which, so good. So good. I was probably sitting near you at Bryn Mawr. That was great. It was so good. It was good. Green Book, the relationship between a black and an Italian man in the 60s and their journey through the South. No spoilers. I think that's the first thing. But one other aspect to kind of talk about with that. It's easy for us to judge what we might perceive as sexism in other cultures and countries and kind of miss it in our own. But it plays out very differently. I think we may sort of feel like the way that, and this is a dangerous kind of trope, the way that Muslim women are treated and oppressed. But we don't sort of make the same judgments about Muslims in Catholicism, or women in Catholicism, I should say, or women in the media here, or the way that women are super objectified in American culture. And this is a bad way to say it, but being a dad of 3 girls, I think I see it in a different way now. And what's worse? Because sort of the way that Muslim women are supposed to cover themselves, or the way that women are hypersexualized and harassed here. I don't know. And that doesn't make one okay. It means like we shouldn't be super judgmental about that. It is also difficult to engage other cultures that we're not from, though. So when Leah comes to campus, we have Orthodox rabbi, a brother named Ephraim, beard 3 times the size of mine. He wears all black every day. They always forget each other. I'm like, Rabbi, this is my wife, Leah. And Leah's always like, nice to meet you, Ephraim. And he's like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry, I can't touch your hand because of religious beliefs, And Leah's always like, man, you always forget to tell me, like, that. And like, we've done this like 4 times. It's kind of we learn. It's okay. I'm a religious professional. I make mistakes all the time. I walk into spaces I'm supposed to take my shoes off and tromp through there in my boots by mistake. I don't mean to. I stand up when I'm supposed to kneel in certain places. Like, we learn and we grow. And the challenge would be to get to know why. I rambled too long in answer, I'm sorry.
I have neighbors who are very devout Muslims. I think the father is a doctor. He's clergy or possibly an academic. How do I, as a Christian, honor their holiday as a neighbor?
Ooh.
I'm Christians, and we exchange cookies, or we do something. How do I do something that's proactive for this Muslim neighbor?
Ask him. Ask them when it's not the holiday. Hey, I heard Ramadan's coming up. Is there some way I'd love to celebrate with you? What can I do? And they say, hey, look, at the end of the days, we have something called iftars where we break our fast. A lot, not all. And I would say many in America don't, but a lot of Muslims fast during Ramadan's, sort of long, multi-week kind of fast, from sun up to sundown. And then they often will have like a breaking of the fast when the sun goes down, called an iftar. And they're like fun dinners, and they get together, communities. Sometimes they'll go to a mosque or masjid or do it at home, have some friends over, and make it an interfaith kind of. But deep hospitality would be hosting them for an iftar dinner. That doesn't serve pork. It would kind of ruin the whole night. I think pigs and blankets. Like, nah, like, oh, you blew it. You had a good chance there. But that'd be amazing. Or even just, a lot of our Muslim friends, a lot of my Jewish friends, when we sort of, wish them a happy new year during Rosh Hashanah, they're like, I didn't know you knew. Thanks.
Is Ramadan something you wish them well, or is it one of those, like, some holidays it's like that kind of thing?
I often say, hey, I know Ramadan's coming up. I hope you have an easy fast. I hope it's meaningful for you. And at the end, they have a holiday called Eid. There's like a couple Eids. And they say, happy Eid. I think it's sort of a funny English kind of translation of that kind of thing. But yeah. But again, ask, hey, how can I as a non-Muslim celebrate you right now? Please.
I was just going to ask, so I have 3 little kids who live here in the Wayne area, Brentmore actually, but I'm from the South, and I grew up in a mostly white area, and I feel like my kids are growing up in a mostly white area. And do you have any recommendations on how to how do you expose your children to things that are not there?
Yeah, I think we struggle with the same stuff. I have a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a surprise 4-year-old. They all were surprises, but she was a big surprise. And but don't tell her.
You don't have a microphone, but this is a large room with some very old ears.
Yes, ma'am.
So, and also with people who are questioning, maybe you could repeat the question.
Sure. The question was around how do we expose young kids to more diverse populations, particularly around faith-wise, when they kind of grow up in homogenous sort of spaces. I think part of the challenge is like, there's just the daily challenge of parenting, and I think to also be tasked with exposing our students, our kids to like the world and making them kind of cool citizens and compassionate, when we're just kind of trying to keep them healthy and patch up boo-boos and get them to school on time and like take them to soccer and do like it's a lot. But I think it's deeply important, probably more important than soccer. And so to take them to stuff when you can. I think there are parts of the country where if I have to drive 3 hours to something, that's hard. But you could drive 20 minutes to something downtown, and to look out when the Hindu American Festival is in Philly. And this transcends religion. I think it's sort of during Black History Month, go to the Black History Museum downtown. Or, go down to the one of the archaeological museum and go through some of the different cultures there and talk about that. Or play music, like the Putumayo CDs of like different cultures, play that stuff. Or best, invite someone to your house. You meet someone along the way, you meet someone at work, or you have an old friend from college or something like that, invite them to dinner. Because I think it's one thing to go to a festival and kind of like see and just have your students, your kids sort of watch Diwali or kind of watch Eid. It's another thing to say, come to my house, please.
We have an opportunity here at Wayne.
Ha-ha!
Interfaith Hospitality Network.
Oh, yeah.
We have families of different faiths, and we're not bringing them into Christianity, but they're families are mostly African American families from different traditions that come into our space. And a lot of families come and they have a meal with them, and they bring their younger children. There's opportunities to stay overnight. But the more interactive one is to sit and have a meal with them.
Yeah.
That's a great way when they're younger. Yeah.
And the one, two, three. The one thing I'll say, like, I'm aware that I'm the only Black friend of a lot of people. And in one sense, I think I don't mind having very real conversations. Chaz, like, this might be weird, but like, is it African American or is it like Black? Like, okay, like, let's talk about it. Or can you come over? And I don't mind being that. On the other hand, like, there's the deep burden of being that too, of kind of being the go-to. And so I have like a go-to Muslim buddy that's different than like my students. And he laughs about like being tokenized, kind of be on every like little interfaith panel, and like being the question when I have a question about how do you think this is going to be received. So kind of we tread very carefully there, yet being brave. We talk about safe conversations, but having brave conversations too. Please.
And I also think, like, you might not realize really how that these communities actually are in our area. So we had a class a couple years ago, Islam 101,
Ooh.
and I'm speaking with the speaker, and then slowly we were narrowing down where we live, and he's my neighbor.
Ha! Well,
Now, he had been away and moved home, but he's my neighbor. And now, like, I stop and visit him. I know his sister. I know their baby. And we have people from India in our neighborhood and people from China in our neighborhood. My daughter was friends with Muslims at TE, and my son lived with two boys from India and an Iranian. And but you kind of like don't see them unless you're looking for them.
yeah.
And so we can, once you start looking, you might actually see them around us. We
Well
do
said.
have them in our community, in our neighborhood.
Well
On
said.
Valley Forge Road, there's a 18th century Baptist church, a Jewish center, and a Muslim center.
Then like a block.
Yeah.
Then a block of them. Please, sir.
Have your hand up? Go ahead.
I was going to say that on the main line, there are opportunities to work with refugees,
Oh,
and they are here, and they need help. I've been intimately involved in that project, so I know the joy, and I've gotten my grandchildren involved with them.
oh,
So what's the organization that you?
Well, one is the Mainline Refugee Organization. There's a group called HCAN. I'm not sure what the acronym stands for. The H is for Haverford, but it's a immigrant and advocacy group. There's a home in Ardmore for refugees first arriving in this country.
Beautiful.
So,
It's such a cool thing. Please, sir.
First of all, thank you.
Thank you.
There's a hidden thank you in there because dementia prevents me from coming up with the name, but you have an assistant chaplain. Do you have several assistant chaplains?
2, Steve Kosher.
Oh, yeah.
Is it Steve?
And for 5 years, when we had the City Lights Network, Inc., Steve would come over to our monthly meetings and involve himself in Wayne Presbyterian's ministry to Southwest Philadelphia.
Oh yeah, that's right.
31 years duration.
Yeah.
Evolved into its own nonprofit that we spun off.
He's on the
And
board.
Steve would come over, and we were members of the board together. And he brought so much to the table in terms of Christian love and an experience, a body of experience that we weren't party to.
Nice.
Second, I certainly resonate with the first priority, and that is love. Because that takes nurturing in your body, in your soul. You have to nurture it all the time.
Preach.
Because when you're entering into a cross-cultural experience, at a minimum, your nonverbal communication is generated from your heart. If your love is superficial, the nonverbal communication will be superficial too. So there has to be a font of love generated by what's inside of you.
Beautiful.
Or people who are not of your faith, not of your culture, not of your ethnicity, will know instantly.
That's brilliant, sir.
And to live and work, Dorothy and I lived in Indonesia for 3 years, so we know deeply involved in a Muslim society.
Yeah.
But even working in Southwest Philadelphia, the religion may be the same, but if she is black or he is Muslim and he is something else, you have to let your heart talk.
Come on. I love that. You know, your words remind me of a quick story. One of my buddies, aforementioned token Muslim friend, he was eating, he and his wife, he has 3 kids, were eating in South Philly a year or 2 ago. They go into a diner and they see a group of sitting there and someone's wearing a Make America Great hat. And he instinctively flinches and is nervous in some unfair ways, in some understandable ways. When they were getting their check to go out, the gentleman in the Make America Great hat paid for his meal. And when I tell that story, a lot of people in the room are like, what? Like, that doesn't pardon a lot that I think has been deeply wounding about the current administration in Islam and Muslims globally. But it was an unexpected act of love that helped heal some of the major distrust there. Again, there's a lot more to talk about. We're not all good after that. But I share that story because I think there's a different heart conversation that can happen rather than the head debates that need to happen. As a person of color in this country, the Sunday after the election, when I walked into the predominantly white church we worship at, it was hard for me to trust every white face in that room. Because of I don't know how you, and again, I'm sorry, but I don't know how you voted, and I don't know why you voted. And I think I could understand if it's maybe just for like a pro-life thing, but if you voted because you really don't want people who are Latino, Latinx in this country, if you think Black Lives Matter is bad, if you think Islam is bad, then it's hard for me to trust sitting next to you in this church. Among the most healing things were when sort of my white fellow congregants would put their arm around me and being like, I imagine this is a hard time right now. And we're not debating politics. It's the unexpected bridge of healing there We will talk politics, we will talk election, we will talk all that later. But there's an already breach that has happened. And so much of the love can be, hey, I don't know how you're perceiving me as a white American right now, as a Republican right now, as someone who's whatever. I want to do something to show you I love you. And that's not debating whether this is a good president, whether he's right or wrong. It's not that. It's an unusual act of love from the heart. Thank you, sir. We got time for a couple more? Oh, come on.
Thank you, Jez. This is so good. So first, just a quick comment and then a real question. And the comment is we're trying to draw together what we've just been talking about love and about the person who puts their arm around you, with the prior conversation about gender and your case study earlier from a hospital, right? The woman who doesn't want to be touched. And so I just have found in my own life in doing interfaith work that there's this constant back and forth of kind of head and heart, and my own impulse to say, I love you and I want to hug you, right? And then realizing that's not the way you want to receive love from me. And so the deeper love then is the self-reflective one where I realize like, okay, my impulse, my immediate impulse, it does flow from a good place, and I have to figure out how to translate it.
Yes.
Right? And I have to do that actually by asking you and sometimes being wrong, and then not responding with, I can't keep track of it. You people are so complicated, right? But you're like, my bad, all right, help me figure this out. I'm sorry, and then I'm sorry that I'm always needing your help to figure it out. but I want to be your loving neighbor. And so I love what you said about just asking, right?
Just ask.
Like, what would it look like for me to be a good neighbor to you right now? And right, it's just it's complicated. But the head has to show up there too, right? Along with that.
Both.
Both.
That's great.
So my question to you is, you still, I imagine, have family and friends who don't think like this, and who don't get the things that you're saying immediately, or don't immediately resonate. And maybe you're having a conversation with them, and they make a comment, and it's hurtful to you on behalf of a brother or sister of another religion or race, right? And so I'm just thinking of a conversation I had with someone, a family member recently, and I just couldn't help it. Like the first words I said were, "That is so offensive. Never use that word again." Right? Like I was so offended on behalf of someone else, and and it put him into this really defensive position. And then it's like now we have to sort of de-escalate. And afterward, I was like, I could handle that better. Right? It was offensive, but but I could handle it better. So I wonder what you can help us do or think about as we have conversations, not with like the other, but with the one who's like us, but not in the same place. Usually family. Yeah.
Usually Thanksgiving. This is great.
Because I feel like with a total stranger, you just go, okay, throw your hands up. But a family member, you're like, I can't believe you think that.
That's such a great question that I think would be a great article, Professor. I mean, that'd be great. I mean, I think, as you're saying, I'm imagining sort of a two-way love. And I think most often we kind of sit it out. And so this is, again, to sort of translate it to racially, this is one of my great suspicions, and paranoia is probably a better term, is that when I'm not in the room, when it's a room of all white people, people talk differently. Which is an irrational paranoia and fear. And the real wound is, and people I love don't say anything. When people use the N-word over there, or when my Italian relatives, are calling black people moolies, that you're not saying anything about it. You're just kind of like, oh, that's crazy uncle, whatever. And you would never say that to me because you love me, but you also don't want to ruin the relationship with crazy uncle, whatever. To me, the two-way love is fighting on behalf of the person not in the room, and still loving the person you grew up with at the same time. And some of that is the hard conversation of dude, that is a bigoted thing you just said. And I love you, and I will be here again next Thanksgiving, but it's not okay. Or, that hasn't been my experience. Maybe it's not so much don't you ever, but that hasn't been my experience. Let me tell you why I think you're wrong. I think this population isn't all that. Or let me tell you why I think that word's pretty offensive. to people. And I know you wouldn't say that if somebody was in the room right now. And I also know why you're saying that, because of a lack of exposure or a lack of ignorance, and I love you there too. So for me, often it's my extended family in Baltimore having harsh things to say about Jewish neighbors. So my dad would often talk about those Jews over in Pikesville because of real experiences of being blocked out of stores as a black person in the 60s in Baltimore and being called the N-word by those Jews back then. That doesn't excuse him using worse language about our Jewish neighbors. And I'm a kid. If I could have that conversation today, I think I'd be like, Dad, it's super complicated. And I don't feel comfortable with you saying that stuff. And it's not okay. And I know you didn't say that when my boy was here together. Like, you know, fighting on behalf of people, not sitting it out, not sitting on your hands, out of fear of rocking the boat, out of fear of making Thanksgiving weird, because then you're not being a good friend. On the other hand, I don't think you're being a good family member if you don't push each other. I think I have been blessed. So I went to an all-boys school growing up, and I remember using the word retard or FAG. And I needed somebody to kind of grab me by my shirt and be like, boy, don't you ever say that word again. And I'm telling you this because I love you. And because you sound ignorant. I needed somebody to kind of get in my face about that. And because you have friends who are differently able than you. And there are gay people in our family. And it's not what Jesus would have you do. Got time for one more?
All right, last one. This is preferable to an annual meeting, I think. So,
Oh, we got to go to the annual meeting?
I have a question.
Please, sir.
Do you have a question or an exercise that you sort of go to help people think about these things? You did a super job telling your story, and we're enwrapped in it, engaged in it. So I'm just wondering if you have a exercise that you'd love to do with new students.
So there's books we have. There's a book called How to Be, that's not the right title, How to Be a Good Neighbor or something like that. How to Be a Perfect Stranger. And there's volume 2 on that kind of thing. I think it's just a cool book to have and kind of read. But there's also the kind of step in the circle activities to see we actually have more in common than we do. So the last story I'll tell you, we took a group of Orthodox Jewish students and Sunni Muslim students to post-Katrina New Orleans. And it was meant to be an interfaith service trip. They're cleaning up and they're doing kind of cool work there, but they also want to get to know one another. And they just wouldn't talk, and they were afraid to talk about Israel, Palestine, about Islam, Judaism. But we did this sort of step in the circle activity. Step in the circle if you believe, Allah is God's last prophet. Half the circle steps in. Step in the circle if you believe, Jews are the chosen people. Half the circle steps in. Step in the circle if you think Jesus is the Son of God and God incarnate. And I step in, they're looking at me like, what is wrong with you? Or step in the circle if your parents would disown you if you married somebody outside of the faith. Oof. Step in the circle if you had a hard time bringing certain foods to school growing up. Oof. Step in the circle if it's hard being your faith at Christmas in America. Oof. And there's a lot that people have in common. That's the first step, I think, to it. So you've been super generous and amazing and put up with a lot. Thank you so much for having me here. Have a good annual meeting. I'll be taking cookies and muffins on the way out. Thank you.
So if you want to stick around and have a little bit of conversation with Chaz, feel free to do so. Otherwise, go to the annual meeting. Otherwise, just, yes.
I'm going to give a little commercial here.